I'm going to do one more real quick sound check, just in case. Last week, I thought we had it all ready to go, and then I was informed later. Okay. Okay, just making sure. Good morning.
Good morning.
Good day to you. Luke chapter 9. Luke chapter 9, right in front of you. There's 3 books. 3 books. 2 of them are red and 1 is black, and Daryl makes sure they're in proper order every Sunday after everything's said and done here. If Daryl's doing his job well, the one in the middle should be black. And that is the book that I would like to invite you to open. You may have your own copy, of course. Luke chapter 9. We're going to be spending some time there, but before we actually read the verse, what I want to do is explain some of the context just a little bit, just to get the juices flowing today, just to get your imagination thinking about what's going on, what the situation is. Jesus, first of all, is approaching the end of his ministry. It was about 3 years, his ministry, and he's actually getting close to the end. Kind of interesting. If you look at the book of Luke, it's 24 chapters, and we're only in chapter 9. And the last little bit, we're already at the last journey, the last moment where he's getting ready to go to Jerusalem for the last and final time. So a lot of the text is dedicated to Jesus's final journey into Jerusalem, chapters 9 through the end of the writing of Luke. So before this, a lot of significant things started happening. Now, first of all, the intensity started to increase. People were starting to get less and less comfortable with this so-called Messiah, who could do miracles, and we can't do miracles. Therefore, we are jealous, and we are going to try to remove him from the scene, remove him from the planet. Honestly, they were trying to kill him. So he actually starts to move. He was hanging around the northern part of Palestine, near the Sea of Galilee, quite a bit, and he starts to move up into Gentile territory, close to Mount Hermon, which was supposed to be a beautiful mountain that you could really see, very lush, fertile area. Some people, I know a few people have been there. You may have been able to even see Mount Hermon if you go to the Holy Land. It's kind of like being able to see, I don't know, the Sierras or something from the Central Valley of California. And they're in a town called Caesarea Philippi. And this is information we kind of collect from Matthew, Mark, and Luke, because they all gave different details for whatever reason. But they're in Caesarea Philippi. And this is where Jesus decides to take them in order to ask his disciples, who do men say that I am? What are the rumors going on? What do people say about me? They answered, people think you're significant. John the Baptist, Elijah, Jeremiah, one of the prophets, Moses come back. People just think you're someone significant. And he says, well, who do you say that I am? And that's when Peter opens his mouth. Peter opened his mouth before everyone else did. Usually it was a mistake. Not this time. This time he says, you are the Christ of God. You are the Christ, the Son of the living God. He made that good confession. And this is almost like a transitional moment when Jesus now starts to tell them in more detail what's about to happen. He takes this opportunity to tell them that he's going to be crucified. The way Matthew records it is Jesus is taken by Peter later on. I mean, he just had this triumphant moment of confessing Jesus to be the Christ. Not long thereafter, he starts correcting and rebuking Jesus, and Jesus says, "Get behind me, Satan." So during this period of time, it was about 6 days later or so, Jesus takes his three, principal disciples, I guess you could call them, Peter, James, and John, goes up into a mountain, and he's transfigured before them. He's got light coming out of him. Elijah and Moses show up. One thing I've never thought about until just this past week, thinking about it, I've never thought about preaching a sermon, Moses' perspective on that. I mean, can you imagine, like Moses, now he gets it. Now he knows, because he's now, it's some other heavenly place, and he's able to go back and hang out with Jesus, the Messiah, right before he's about to take his journey back into Jerusalem, which would be his final time going there in the flesh, at least the way he was at this time. Or Elijah, his perspective. So imagine Peter's perspective, John's perspective, James's perspective. They were tired. Jesus wore them out. And as Jesus won't quit, just keeps on healing people and teaching and doing all these things. And he never gets tired. And we're always sleepy over here. The only time he takes naps is whenever there's life-threatening storms. I don't know what this guy's problem is, But this is the backdrop, like the background of what's going on. And there's more that happens, but this is the moment when, like, the spirit, like the spiritual heavenly realm, like in a way that we can only imagine, at least. I think we all, whenever we're in prayer, we kind of get a taste of what that transfiguration would have been like, but we could just get just like a little taste of it, I think sometimes when we're singing salvation has been brought down, we could get a little taste of what a transfiguration would have been like, but to be there and actually see the fullness, that must be the most full way the heavenly realms came down and was placed upon flesh, man, Jesus, light coming out of him. And then the actual voice of the Father, he only spoke up a couple of times in the New Testament. The baptism of Jesus, his transfiguration. Interrupting Peter. This is my beloved son. Like Jesus is almost like being re-energized to actually go and fulfill the task he was sent to accomplish. We have to stop and think about that. As Christians, as humans, we have to stop and think about that. Jesus, in the beginning of his ministry, he gets baptized. Wasn't long after that, he goes out into the wilderness to fast for 40 days. Now, I don't think that's an accident. I'm pretty sure that he was making sure that flesh was under submission. He was preparing to do crazy stuff according to the flesh, according to the human perspective. He was preparing to go to the wolves, like a sheep going to the wolves, and he had to be strong. Even Jesus went up to mountains and had to spend one-on-one time with God in prayer. This is important stuff. Remember, after that happened, after he resisted the temptation of Satan after the 40 days of fasting, you remember what happened, right? Angels came and ministered to him. We don't want to misunderstand and forget the truth and facts, the importance of the fact that Jesus was still human. Whenever we do that, it helps us kind of understand that we have to do the same kind of stuff. We have to pray. We have to get our bodies in check. The Apostle Paul said that he made sure that daily he made sure his body was under submission. He wrote about it in 1 Corinthians, and he said that this is just like being in preparation for the Olympics. You have to control everything that you eat, everything you do, if you want that gold. No other way. So now, clearly, this was a type of preparation, a type of almost like a personal institution placed upon Jesus. A reminder, not just to him, but to those that were present, who told the story later after his resurrection. And that is the background for the verse that we're about to read. Luke chapter 9. We'll read verses 51 through 53 to get us started. Luke 9, 51 through 53. And it came to pass, when the time was come that he should be received up, he steadfastly set his face to go to Jerusalem, and sent messengers before his face. And they went and entered into a village of the Samaritans to prepare for him. And they did not receive him, because his face was as though he would go to Jerusalem. To start us off, mainly verse 51 is going to be the central text for this morning. I want to share, I want to develop this and think about this with you today. It's always been interesting to me when I read this, whenever I take my time, whenever I happen to be moving through the book of Luke, whenever sometimes you come across verses by accident. It's just the way it happens. You know, you got your word in your hand, and you're studying, you're reading, and then you get reminders of this verse. This is one of those verses. It's like a pivotal moment, isn't it? It's like a transitional, and that's the reason why we spent all that time talking about what was happening prior to this moment. What was happening, the confession of Peter and the significance thereof, the transfiguration of Jesus and the significance thereof. And now this moment, which is like a type of trigger, a type of moment, one of those moments when your spirit gets awakened within you and you have this realization, you know that you have to go and do something. Why it's worded this way and what exactly happened within the consciousness of Jesus is mysterious to us, because we know that he always had this kind of stuff on his mind. Jesus was still human. He still had a consciousness. He still had a brain like we have, a physical brain, which means he had a prefrontal cortex, and he had an amygdala, and he had all this stuff in the brain the same way we do. He had to deal with all those weaknesses. And of course, the spirit was able to overcome all that. So what exactly happened? It doesn't say, other than the context. It's almost as if Jesus wasn't actually like thinking about it quite directly yet. And then at verse 51, the way Luke writes, it's like he kind of comes to this moment. Oh wait, yeah, that's why I was transfigured. It's time. The time is here. And it's like the spirit just kind of woke up something within him to tell him, yo, it's time to start moving now. And I don't know if it was hanging out, because he spent some time hanging out in the northern regions. After spending some time way up toward Mount Hermon, he started moving back down. He spent some time in Galilee again. And then it was probably about that time, when you compare the way the Synoptic Gospels piece it together, it was probably after you come back down, back into Jewish territory, that this happened. And I don't know if he was waiting for a call, waiting for a moment, but something triggered him to start moving. Hasn't that happened to you? Hasn't it happened to you? Don't you get it? You know you're here because you know that you ought to be going somewhere. You are here because you expect this dude up here to show you something out of the word. Now, I don't stand up here to tell you guys doing just fine. That's not my job. Everyone, go ahead and pat yourself on the back. You're doing just fine. You're doing terrible. You need to do better. That's what my job is. My job is to show you some verse to make you realize to wake up that spirit within you and get you to say, I need to start moving in a certain direction right now. Jesus was, I don't know if he had like peaks and valleys of his ministry, but something significant was stirred up within his spirit. It's in the epistles. Peter writes about it in 2 Peter chapter 1. He says, I want to stir you up for remembrance. We start talking about being a partaker of the divine nature. You guys are partakers of the divine nature. Do you understand what that means? How significant, how amazing that is? Add to your faith virtue, the virtue knowledge, the knowledge temperance, the temperance patience, the patience godliness, the godliness brotherly kindness, and the brotherly kindness love. And then he says 3 times after that, I want to stir you up to remember who you are. Because we kind of start to forget sometimes who we are. I don't think Jesus ever forgot who he was, but something happened within him. It wasn't a weakness, and it may not even be a weakness on your part. Maybe you just need to be woken up today. Isn't that what happened to the prodigal son? You know that parable of the prodigal son? We're already in Luke, so this is really easy. Just take a couple of pages over to chapter 15. Prodigal son, he was a bum. Let's just call it what it is. He was a bum. He was a spoiled, rotten brat. Kind of reminds me of humans. We got the most amazing Father in heaven, who, when we ask him for bread, he's not going to give you a stone. You ask him for a fish, he's not going to give you a serpent. He's going to give you the best of the best. He already gave you Jesus. In my prayers, I have that problem where I say, God, I keep asking you for stuff. You already gave me the best, but I'm going to keep asking because I'm a spoiled, rotten brat. That's why. And this man right here was a spoiled brat. He asks his father for his inheritance early, and then he goes off and he wastes it. He ends up in a famine, finds himself feeding hogs, which would have been a horrible vocational calling for a Jewish person, especially during the time that pork was unclean. But I like verse 17, because as he finds himself actually like desiring what the hogs are eating, verse 17 says, and when he came to himself, that's the moment. That was like a moment right there where he just woke up. And you're like, it's like when you wake up in a ditch. That actually happened. Some of the best conversion stories are the people who woke up in a ditch and then thought, what am I doing? What am I doing with my life? I actually know a literal story kind of like that. A guy who actually at one time was a preacher, and he started to try the world. He tried to enjoy the world's riches. Ended up becoming a drug and an alcohol addict. Actually started to practice a men with men lifestyle. Ended up in San Francisco. He was out in the East Coast. Ended up in San Francisco. Woke up on a curb one day and thought, what am I doing? Now, you all look kind of nice right now. I don't think any of you woke up in a ditch. If you did, you did a good job. You did all right. You're looking okay. But that happens. We got to wake up out of our ditch. And I wake up and, man, I caught myself complaining the other day. Fussing about something. What do I got to fuss about? That's my ditch. You know, the scripture says to not murmur, to not complain. And then it says by doing so, you actually show yourself to be a light for the world. How in the world are you going to convince somebody that Christianity is great if you fuss, if you moan and groan and complain? Maybe that's your ditch. We get wrapped around all kinds of axles in this world. We got wrapped around all kinds of things and problems and issues. And sometimes we just need someone or something or a spirit to wake us up. And Jesus, somehow, in this situation, he finds himself waking up and realizing it's time to move. And then what happens is, it actually specifies it. Go back to chapter 9, verse 51 again. It goes on. It says, now, and it came to pass. And again, this is Luke writing. It's so interesting just how casually he seems to write it. And it came to pass when the time was come that he should be received up. As if that's not like an amazing thing, you know. It should be all caps with a couple exclamation points. The time is coming for him to be received up. This means he's going to be resurrected. Like, that's a pretty amazing thing. Anybody else wondering what your destiny is? Can we relate to Jesus on this regard? Can we relate to him in this particular matter? Isn't that our destiny also? You know, it's like one of those moments talking about in the class this morning, how significant resurrection is supposed to be to us. It's supposed to actually be a direction for you to go. It's your northern star. The resurrection gives you purpose. What was Jesus' purpose? We can read about it. Just following this. We can read about it. We all have our little purpose. We all have our little things that we're doing and we are committing ourselves to. Man, I know somebody who, and I'm talking beyond just the overall, you know, provide for yourself and for your family. You're worse than an infidel. I'm not talking about that. First Timothy or Second Thessalonians when he says, man not work, neither should he eat. No, we all have to do that. We all have to worry about the harvest and putting food on the table and those kind of things. You know, and that's all fine and good. Some people, their purpose right now, in that regard, is to enjoy the retirement. Man, that's good. And nothing wrong with that. That's a good thing. Some people, I know somebody whose purpose is to, one of his purposes is to cut hair. And he uses that to talk to people about Jesus. You know, I know somebody who knows a lot about the law. They may be able to use that for Jesus and to help preach the gospel, right? I know some people who have all kinds of vocational calls. I know some people who are able to even use that retirement to do good things for Jesus. But we have to understand, what is our purpose in this life? And it's not to just be comfy. And it's not to have luxury. That's not our purpose. Now, the world's going to try to get you to think that that's all there is to life. Tropical islands and people feeding you grapes. People are going to think that that's what our purpose is. That is not what we're here to do. And another people are even able to take their spiritual outlook and then even mess with that and to think that their purpose is to be some kind of superior one. Take a look at the context. We just read in the verses that we read today, verses 51 through 53, that in this journey, Jesus is on his way back to Jerusalem. They come across a Samaritan village. It's a mystery to me what exactly it means when it says that they were wondering, or that they noticed that his face was as though he would go to Jerusalem. I don't know what that means exactly, but they knew his intent. And what are the implications of that? I really don't know. It must have just been a problem with the Samaritans and how they viewed the Jews. But I don't know if it was more significant than that because this was the Messiah. I don't know. I really don't have enough insight to be able to explain that. But then, it's pretty normal, especially if you got the Son of God with you and he gets rejected. You're going to have a response kind of similar to verse 54. When his disciples, James and John, saw this, so this is after the Samaritans rejected him, they said, Lord, should we command fire to come down from heaven and consume them like Elijah did? I mean, isn't that what we ought to, isn't that just a natural reaction? I'm telling you, that's actually kind of the world we're living in right now, isn't it? It's kind of the world we're living in, isn't it? Huh. I don't like talking about this issue. I don't like talking about this kind of subject matter. But it has to come up because it's the world we're living in. I grew up around people who would make statements like this. It's just kind of just the culture that I grew up in. Grew up in a culture where people would be so bold as to almost gloat at the misfortune of other people when a natural disaster would happen. I actually can recall people talking about what happened in New Orleans with Hurricane Katrina. And I can actually recall when people would say, well, they kind of deserved it, didn't they? And would actually kind of make statements like that. And here's the reason why this is a big deal, is because there's a lot of people who want to see division in the world today. And when I get people saying the same kind of stuff, I spent some time in Idaho. That was a very, just what you would call a conservative area. And and it's easy to talk trash when you're the majority, right? It's easy to talk trash when everyone agrees with you. And I would hear things like, the only good Democrat is a dead Democrat. I'd actually hear those kinds of sayings. And here's the people who claim to be faithful children of God. People who put the name Christ on themselves. We got a lot of division happening in the world today. And so, it's a natural response to look at the way things are happening in the world and say, man, why does God just come right now? The end times are coming. Isn't it obvious? You have no idea what you're talking about. Not even Jesus knew. He told his disciples, Matthew 24, the world is crazy, but it's been crazy since Adam showed up. So what's the difference? Every 50 years or so, we all think we're so selfish. We think we're the only ones who do something. There was a dude named Hitler trying to take over the world just about 60 years ago. Pretty sure it was tough then, too. And it is no reason to divide. Our purpose needs to be as closely matched to the purpose of Jesus as possible. Amen. So let's read what he said. Verse 55. But he turned and rebuked them. He rebuked them, by the way. He didn't say, good thought. Let me think about it. He said, know what spirit you're speaking from. Remember 1 John chapter 4, when we're told to try the spirits? We're told to test the spirits. Jesus says, you don't know what spirit you're talking from right now. It's not the spirit that I do. Verse 56. For the Son of Man has not come to destroy men's lives, but to save them. Compare that now with James chapter 5. James chapter 5. You know, the way James concludes his writing here, very practical, very straightforward, very well done. A masterpiece indeed. This is the way he decides to finish it up. Verses 19 and 20, chapter 5. Brethren, if any of you do err from the truth and one convert him, let him know. He which converts the sinner from the error of his way shall save a soul from death, shall hide a multitude of sins. How similar is that to what Jesus said back in Luke chapter 9? How similar is that? Jesus' purpose was to go around saving souls, saving lives, bring God's grace to people. Statement was made really similar to what we're talking about right now. In the class this morning, when we were talking about the subject of death and resurrection, Anthony paraphrased Romans 1:16. He was talking about resurrection and some of the ways that's important to us. And Romans 1:16 says, the Apostle Paul says, I am not ashamed of the gospel of Christ, for it is the power of God unto salvation to everyone who believes, the Jew first, and also to the Greek. In another writing, from the Apostle Paul, he says this in Ephesians 3 somewhere along the way. He said that God had entrusted the church with his gospel, with his saving, powerful gospel. Jesus came here. A very skilled man, wasn't he? I wish I could have seen the table that he built in his vocational situation. I mean, I don't know how, I've read stuff about it. No one really knows exactly what he did, what he built houses or whatever. Man, you guys looking for buy some land, get a contractor. I'll pick Jesus. It's about a good house, It's like leather that they're floating in the air. He figured out some way to make houses float in the air, and it's physically possible. He figured it out. I don't know how he figured it out. He cracked the code of hovering for houses. I mean, who knows what's possible in the world today? My family's like 2,000 miles away. I can see their faces when I talk to them on the phone. So tell somebody 100 years ago that was going to be possible. Like, hand Jesus some silicon. He's like, comes back with the best computer you ever seen, right? I mean, he knows everything. He was quite skilled. And that's just if you confine him to the boundaries of this world, of the physical boundaries. Man, he could do beyond that. He could be like, California needs some rain. Bam, there it is for you. If he wanted to heal somebody from a disease that they could not conquer and no doctor could conquer him, bam, he could do it. He could commit miracles. He actually spoke the universe into existence. Isn't that something? That's not what he bragged about. That's not actually what he really came here to do. He didn't come here to show off how powerful he was. You know what power he bragged about? I'm not ashamed of the gospel of Christ, for it is the power of God unto salvation. It doesn't matter what we do, what purpose you think you got, how good you are at what you do. If you don't use it for the glory of God, that's what Jesus did. All of his behavior, all of his actions, everything he did, the gospel was woven into it. And then we're told that we have the same responsibility to convert a sinner from the error of his way. He trusted you with the gospel. I've read in like leadership books and stuff like that. I do read that kind of stuff. You're like, we're not very good leaders, Dave. Well, I read the books and try. Well, one of the best ways to God has done it. I think about Moses. One of the best ways to get somebody to really step up is to trust them with something, because then that gives them some power over their situations, confidence in what they're doing. The best ways to help somebody grow and learn. I mean, that's where we all are. We've been trusted with the power of God unto salvation. That's a massive purpose. Something to take serious. I don't doubt that you do take it serious. But remember, the point of this lesson is that little trigger to kind of wake us up sometimes. Jesus received word that it was time to be received up. What he did was he steadfastly, and this is going back to the verse, Luke 9:51. When the time was come, he should be received up. He steadfastly set his face to go to Jerusalem. And then he made his journey. He started his journey. And you can read about it from chapter 9, chapter about 22 or so in the book of Luke. You can read about his journey. His journey was to the cross. And he really made up his mind. He had a commitment to it. He steadfastly set his face to go to that calling. And there was a journey involved. And the prodigal son had a similar kind of journey, didn't he? He was off in a faraway land. We were just talking about the prodigal son. It was a faraway land. When he came to himself, he started to reason with himself. You can actually kind of read the thought process that he went through. He says, well, this is what I will do then. And this is what we need to do. Okay, let's do it. Let's go read it real quick, because this is useful for our cause. We're in Luke chapter 15, the prodigal son. Let's go ahead and read verses 17 down to about verse 20 or so. Luke 15, 17 through 20. And when he came to himself, he He said, how many hired servants of my father's have bread, enough to spare? And I'm over here perishing with hunger. I will arise. Notice that. Notice the affirmative. Notice the inner dialogue that he's having. Because that's what this is. This is an inner dialogue. We can actually read the thought process, the thought patterns of this prodigal son. I will arise and go to my father and will say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you, and am no more worthy to be called your son. Make me as one of your hired servants. And he arose, came to his father, but when he was yet a far way off, his father saw him and had compassion, ran, fell on his neck and kissed him. Now, Jesus' journey, starting here from the moment where he's transfigured and a few days go by, and then he makes his journey to start going back down south to Jerusalem, which you know would not be an easy journey to make. It'd be tough to know. I mean, you just think about your own sin. Think about your own ridiculous things that you have done. And just paying for it, the consequences in the flesh now, some of the things that you've done, and you had to eat crow because of what you've done. And you had to swallow your pride because of rotten things you've done. You've all done something rotten, and you know it, and you just don't, you want to avoid even thinking about it because it really stinks to think about. It's hard to really think about our sins and then tell somebody, well, you're gonna have to do that and feel that and experience that for every single person on the planet. That's an enormous thing to have to deal with. He's making this journey, and he knows what's going to happen. He's aware of what's going to happen. The prodigal son is in kind of similar circumstances that we are. Because we can set our face to go to our destiny as well. We can steadfastly set our face to go on this journey. Some of us have longer than others. None of us know what the time will be, what the time frame will be. None of us is guaranteed tomorrow. But what we ought to do is think about how we are going to handle it. Problems. Think about how we're going to handle the opposition. Think about how we are going to deal with the temptation. Actually simulate thinking about the journey that we must take. There's going to be lots of challenges. It's going to be lots of kinds of people. One of the funny things is about us people, I talked about this last week when I was talking about routine. We get comfy with our routines. We want to just keep going with our routines. One time, Bob and I were having a conversation. He talked about he'd go up to or go down to San Jose or something, be in his car commuting, and then he would be pulling into his parking spot, and he'd be like, well, how'd I get here? Because that's how our routines become. And sometimes it's the same sin that gets you every time because you know it's coming. You know the temptation's coming. You know when this friend shows up, you're going to be tempted to do things you ought not do. You know when this family member shows up, Thanksgiving's coming up. You guys know how I love to talk about Thanksgiving. It's like the worst and best day in the whole year where we get to eat so much food with people that bug us. You know what I mean? And you know that someone is going to get under your skin. You already know what's going to happen. Prepare for it. Think about it. Think about how you're going to let the light of Jesus shine on that day. Think about how you're going to let the light of Jesus shine when you go to work. Think about how you're going to let the light of Jesus shine in all of your affairs, all of your plans, all of your routines. And start to think it through because you already know what's going to happen. And then there's the destiny. And go ahead and write out what you're going to say to Jesus when you're resurrected. Go ahead and plan it because you know you're going to be counted with the people because you did what he said, because you believed in him, because you were baptized for the remission of your sins, because you lived a life of bringing the light of the gospel to other people and you weren't ashamed of it and you planned it through and you didn't just go along with the routine, but you were somebody in the kingdom. Something woke up Jesus that day to make him go on that journey. The advantage that he had is he knew every single thing that was going to happen, every question that was going to be asked, every opposition. And then I stop and I think, wait, what advantage did he have? Don't you got the book? I already directed your attention to it. Right in front of you, there's 3 of them. 2 red ones, they're good books too. But Daryl made sure that there will be one in the middle that's black. You got the book. You got the plan. You know the future. You know who's going to win in the end. Make sure you live like it on your journey. And at this particular moment, through the history of time, our journeys are linked together because you're here with me and I am here with you. I wanted to make sure that before you left here, I would at least try to trigger that moment when you realize I got something I got to do, and I'm going to make sure that I do it, and I'm going to be successful on that journey. For some of you, it might be just taking that step to be baptized. Some of you, it's a different step. Whatever step you need to take, today is the day. Now is the day of salvation, Paul wrote. So today is the day to make sure you are on that straight and narrow path and journey. In the name of Jesus, if you need to make that step